Buckeye Talk video version from cleveland.com. Try the texts. Nathan Baird has opted out of this podcast. Nathan, is that correct? Have you opted out?
I'm here.
We're not making fun of opt-outs. We're acknowledging the fact that the opt-outs are coming fast and furious, and we are recording this at 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And by the time we get done, there may be another rash of opt-outs. A bunch of North Carolina guys opted out today. 5 Maryland guys opted out today. Another Michigan State guy opted out today. Syracuse, the players decided not to practice on the first day of practice today because they're worried about the protocols in the rest of the ACC. There's a lot happening with this, and there's something happening with Ohio State with this. So that's what we're going to talk about on this podcast. Ohio State has 2 practices in. They practiced Thursday morning and Friday morning. Ohio State players sent out a letter that's important today, and since we recorded on Thursday, Rondale Moore at Purdue has opted out. From the 843, assuming everything continues as planned, was Ohio State just gifted with an ACC Clemson schedule? And Nathan, when you wrote about this, it's not just Rondale Moore. It's Rondale Moore added to what else has happened in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's Rondale Moore on top of Rashad Bateman, on top of Micah Parsons, on top of what we didn't know at the time I wrote that, which was 5, 6 Maryland players, including their potential presumptive starting quarterback. I mean, if the Tagovailoa younger brother doesn't get granted eligibility at Maryland, I think you might be number 2 on the 2 deep at quarterback, which is a disaster for them. I think they may have like a true freshman or redshirt freshman as their only scholarship guy available at that point. So, I mean, it's just all over the Big Ten. We started to see really outside of Columbus, outside of Ohio State, the star power in the Big Ten. It hasn't like depleted completely, but it's definitely taken a hit. I mean, these are the other best players in the Big Ten. I mean, I would have argued Micah Parsons. I mean, I don't have to argue it. I mean, it was a consensus of the 34 media people who voted in our poll, and these aren't fly-by-night men and women that do this. The consensus of them was Micah Parsons, unanimous Big Ten Player of the Year preseason for defense, and then Rondale Moore, number 2, Rashad Bateman, number 3, behind Justin Fields as Offensive Player of the Year. So 3 of the top 5 players in the Big Ten are now not playing football this year. It definitely changes the complexion of what this season's going to be.
Penn State was the number 1 challenger. They just lost their best player. Purdue is the voodoo upset team that was just added. They just lost their best player. Minnesota is kind of lurking in the West. Boy, Ohio State has Wisconsin's number, but Minnesota with that passing game, maybe a more athletic team in some ways than Wisconsin. If Ohio State wound up playing Minnesota in the Big Ten championship game, maybe that would be an interesting challenge. They just lost their best player. Not that Ohio State needed it, and not that I would have predicted anything other than 10-0 based off the schedule that was released this week. But man, I mean, how would anybody on the schedule, Michigan State has lost a start. Is it 2 starting offensive linemen or 1 on defense and 1 on offense? They've lost 2 starters to opt out. It's just an easy path is significantly, I think. I mean, is it fair to say significantly easier for Ohio State with these players out?
It's not just that these teams are losing their best players. That would be bad enough. But, I mean, in Micah Parsons and Rondale Moore, you're losing special players. You're losing the kind of players who we would then, at the end of a game, if those teams upset Ohio State, look back and say those were the guys who made the difference. Or 5 years from now, we look back and say, well, the reason Purdue was able to upset Ohio State twice in 3 years was because they had this electric special player in Rondale Moore, and they found a way to use him. I mean, I obviously covered him up close for that one season, but I mean, Ohio State players saw it, or Ohio State fans saw it that day. Like, that's a different kind of guy. They know Micah Parsons was a different kind of guy too, because Ohio State recruited him and was involved in that process, and they knew what he was going to be coming into college, I think. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's not just that good players are leaving Ohio State's schedule. It's the kind of players who would have potentially facilitated those upsets. I think you're right. I think it makes we were talking earlier this week, right, about the percentage chance of Ohio State not going 10-0 at this point. It's gotten exponentially much closer to 100% now that they'll go 10-0 if they're able to play all 10 of these games.
This is a completely new experience, and I don't like the feeling at all. I feel incredibly disappointed. My excitement about the season is substantially lessened by this. And it doesn't mean that I don't think they shouldn't do it. It doesn't mean I think it's not the right decision for Micah Parsons and Rashad Bateman and Rondale Moore and everybody at North Carolina and the Michigan State guys and the Maryland guys, but it stinks